Joined by Bruce Tague and Brian Lind from Sportsmen's Alliance to talk about the latest in sportsmen and hunting bills all across the United States. We may dip into what is happening federally, but we'll largely concentrate on some looming battles across the states. But fellas, it's good to speak with you guys again and to hear what's on your mind about different legislation, pending legislation.
It's great to be back. Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Always love coming on here.
Awesome. Well, could you guys, whichever one of you want to start, want to talk about some legislation that people should be aware of? We keep hearing about this potential ban on black bear hunting. You guys have alluded to a New Mexico trapping ban. It seems like we see more and more legislation being piled on. I think when we last spoke, we said that with the turn of certain legislatures to a certain political orientation, we saw a lot of anti-hunting legislation come about. I bet it's a lot more now. So could you speak to the volume of bills that have been filed that sportsmen and women should be worried about?
Sure. I'll start, Brian. Every year, we get inundated with bills, and a lot of folks, I think, thought with the COVID, things would slow down a little bit and state legislatures would really focus on the issues in their states that really mattered. But the antis, they're opportunists. They see this as an opportunity. A lot of your committees are not having normal hearings. They're being done via Zoom. A typical hearing, you could maybe have 100 or 200 people that want to participate and speak, and they're limiting the amount that they're limiting our voices. Currently, right now, we're at the same pace we were last year. The Sportsmen's Alliance alone, we've reviewed well over 1,000 bills that could potentially affect hunting, fishing, and trapping all across the country at the state and federal level. There are some big pieces of legislation that you alluded to that we're hyper focused on right now. One is the black bear hunting ban in California. Don't need to tell you, that's your home state. I feel so sorry for you. I believe you said your mom and dad still live there. Get them out of there. Get them out of there. Next is going to be your dad's favorite, which is fishing, right? Your dad's a big fisherman. Is that?
Actually, they left. They live here in Virginia. My dad left.
Oh, good.
Mom followed. Oh, no, we all left. But yeah, it's kind of like how they've taken fishing in a bad direction. But no, they got out.
Yeah, well, in California, there's a lot of talk, a lot of time in our world of death by 1,000 cuts. Well, California's just they're dropping daisy cutters. They banned, bobcat's going to be. Well, here's what they did last year with the bobcat. They stopped the season and said, we're going to do a study. And in 2025, right, Brian, it's 2025, they're going to come back and have a discussion to see if they should reinstate the season. The three of us know darn well, and your listeners know, there's never going to be a season on bobcat ever again in the state of California. They banned recreational trapping last year as well. Now they want to ban bear hunting. So, I mean, they're not even trying to be sneaky about it. They're just going ahead and ban that. So all of your listeners need to hammer the heck out of the folks in California, the legislature, and let them know that this is terrible. The North American model is what brought the black bear population up to the conservative estimate right now of CFDW is 30 to 40,000. In the 80s, it was 10 to 15,000. So the North American model that we all live by, right? We preach it every day, created this abundant population of black bear in the state of California. And legislators and anti say, well, it was good for us to get the population up, but we're not going to pay attention to that now and how to manage these predators and stuff like that. We're just going to shut it down. It's very dangerous. It sets a dangerous precedent too. We also have seen in Oregon, they're trying to ban beaver trapping again on federally managed land. We were able to beat that back last year, but it's reared its ugly head again up there. You can see the pattern here too. Oregon, California. Now we move down to New Mexico. The governor last year, they banned coyote contests, predator contests. And now they're trying to do an outright ban on recreational trapping as well. So any of your folks in the New Mexico area, they need to call in as well. The senator there, these folks, it's very frustrating because they don't, they latch onto science when it suits their argument, but then they totally ignore it when it doesn't suit their agenda or the folks that are paying their campaign bills. So those are really three big ones right now. When you look across the rest of the nation, we still have a lot of the same things that we see every year. We've got tethering restrictions, no dogs outside anytime whatsoever. So, a lot of these bills get repeated too. New York State's a terrible state. They come out with just terrible legislation. So, keeps us on our toes. Now I've talked too much. Brian, you're up.
Well, I think that's, kind of the point here is that, it ramps up right now because all the legislatures are coming back in. And so we're getting a flood. And in the states where they're not well established, they're, saying they just want to take one method or one mean. California, they're not even trying anymore. Like, they're not even hiding it. Like last year, talking about the bobcats, they make it seem like, oh, it can come back, but we have to do these studies first, and we have to do it one thing at a time. And I think the bill would require the hiring of 2 full-time employees. And I think at the end of the day, it costs like $2.75 million. It'll cost to bring bobcat back.
Yeah.
Or you've like $42,000 license sale. So now their argument can be, well, it doesn't make economic sense to bring this back. It would cost the taxpayers money, Meanwhile, they forget that when they banned mountain lion hunting, they also snuck in there the fact that they have to have a necropsy every time they use a depredation permit, which had no funding mechanism tied to it. So it's costing taxpayers out of the general fund for fish and game, But now they're not even pretending. Now they're just flat out, let's ban bear hunting. And they use a circular argument. They argue that we keep game populations artificially high, and then they say we kill too many of them. And then they use that to ban it. So, I mean, it makes no sense. You have to suspend reality and suspend logic and enable to make that make sense. Fine. If we keep them artificially high, we'll kill more if you want. Like, what's the logic here? It doesn't make sense. So it's just those blatant attacks. And we're, like you said, New Mexico, ban trapping. That's happening in California. It's happened here in Washington State. They're going after beavers, and it's just piece and parcel to get it done, or they're just going to slap this whole thing up there across. And in Oregon, the trapping of beavers, it's following the playbook that they follow. Last year, it was a citizen's petition that got denied. Now it's going through the legislative route. When that fails, hopefully, we'll be able to stop it. They'll probably sue on some grounds and try it in the courts. When that fails, you're likely to see a ballot initiative. That's just kind of how they move through the trajectory of the political arc there.
And they've got folks that support them that give them the hundreds of millions of dollars to do this all across the nation. Just getting back quick to what Brian said about California last year when they banned the recreational trapping. It's funny that the news really didn't report what happened afterwards. If you recall, I think I may have even pinged you on this, Gabby. The esteemed governor out there had to ask for emergency appropriations to kill all the nutria. So you had trapping, recreational trapping and stuff to handle nutria, and they had to do some outrageous amount of money to keep killing nutria. It's a lot of this anymore, like Brian said, is just blatant political kowtowing to the loudest voices who are doing things. And unfortunately, in the end of the day, it's going to be the citizens of California that suffer with higher taxes. You can't tell me that the Humane Society and PETA and these other groups don't know that the state then has to take over killing animals. Like you do away with hunters and trappers, okay? Animals, the management is just going to continue magically. No. it doesn't work that way.
It's actually going to be more costly to the taxpayer. It's going to come at the detriment of conservation dollars, as we know, and really do nothing except assuage their so-called concerns about this elimination of wildlife. And I wanted to speak to kind of what the methods we're seeing, because we know what ballot box biology is when you vote in these different initiatives. So what can we call this legislative process that is anti-science? Because overall, the black bear is probably one of the least concerned, according to the IUCN. It's not anywhere near endangered, and according to California's figures, they similarly mirror what IUCN says about the black bear status. Missouri just their conservation department approved a black bear hunt, a very highly regulated, obviously, black bear hunt. So we saw some victories there, but it's just so strange that we see, because we see overall, and without really steeping into politics as a whole, we do see, unfortunately, a lot of people say that they speak to the science, but when it comes to wildlife conservation, obviously their arguments are not rooted in science. It's more so emotion and pathos and all these kind of illusory comparisons or arguments that they make that has nothing to do rooted in science. And I think it's going to be problematic, especially in the case of California, when it happens with that. And I think I've seen pleas from their Department of Fish and Wildlife that they want more hunters. So I don't know if they're fighting against this at all much. I know they have to kind of be nonpartisan, but I have no doubt if they're trying to now focus on recruiting hunters, they see this bill and how much monies come from bear hunting. I suspect they should be alarmed. But for the longest time, I felt like the Fish and Wildlife Department there really didn't throw a bone to hunters. I never saw anything to market to hunters when I lived there and grew up there. I didn't know you could go hunting unless you were super wealthy or super connected. Maybe because I just was very limited in my exposure. I went fishing. Fishing was great in California, still is great. But I wonder if there could be a lot of implications that come with that. But has there been a lot of, obviously, coalescing of different hunting interests? I've seen a petition so far circulate. I've seen some of the different sportsmen's organizations kind of sound the alarm of this. So what so far has been taken? And actually, when is this bill going to be heard? Do you guys know when it's going to be heard and how it would be decided?
We could never pinpoint exactly when a bill is going to be heard. A perfect example was Virginia Sunday hunting that you talked about earlier. The bill dropped, came up. We're doing our research, making phone calls. 5 p.m. that night, they put it on the calendar to go to a committee hearing. We scrambled, made phone calls, did all we could to go into the committee hearing. They called the vote and killed it. Sometimes you have, they'll run the process. My thoughts on Virginia are the same as yours, is that was a done deal before the bill even got introduced. They said, well, here's what we're going to do. This is how we're going to kill it, and we'll be done. In California's case, initially we think it could have maybe a potential hearing in March, but it could be before that. With all the pressure that we've been able to apply, they may want to get it in and out very quickly, or they may want to wait and do it. But we can never rely on, unfortunately, what the politicians tell us. We've got to fight as soon as we can, and continue to fight and try to kill these bills. And on the flip side, if it's a bill that we're advocating for, it's the same thing. As soon as we have the language, we know if it's good or bad, and we're engaging on it. We've got to do it right to the very end. I think the other problem that you kind of talked about, Gabby, was, we've seen a lot of moves to do stuff legislatively, and game commissions not necessarily being willing to stand up and fight, if you will. Unfortunately, everything's turned political these days. If you're in a state where the governor gets to a point, you're going to do whatever the governor says. If you're in a state that has lax commission rules on who can be a member, you're going to wind up with folks that might not have hunting, fishing, and trapping as their main priority. So it all depends. It all depends on where you are in the country, how your legislative system works, how appointments are made, how your commission's made up. Brian and I talk all the time. It's like some states are really good. They have really good laws on who can serve on those commissions, what power and authority the governor has on his or her own. In some states, it's really kind of up for interpretation. And unfortunately, some of the bigger states like California and New York, where, hunting, fishing, and trapping heritage has been there since the beginning of time, where you have a lot of individuals who like to participate in, what our heritage is. These politicians are circumventing the system and dropping legislation here, and the antis, they get their ear, and we just got to fight.
And the tough part about the fight thing, especially with media and keeping people energized, is I was kind of talking about this yesterday with somebody, that it's a marathon with sprints. Like, it comes in and you sprint, making noise, and then it might go to committee, and it might be a month or 6 weeks or something before it comes up again, and you need to apply that pressure again. And so people get lax, they go back to life, they think the threat's gone, and then you're ramping it up again, trying to get it going. And the more often you have to do that, the harder it is to energize somebody to take that step to call or email or whatever. And so it's a long process. It's a marathon, but there's a whole lot of sprints in between there that you have to run hard and fast at them and apply that pressure. So that gets very difficult from a marketing and communication standpoint, from a media standpoint, on turnaround deadlines and everything else.
The individual legislators too, Gabby, you would think that, Brian and I, looking at, hundreds and hundreds of pieces of legislation each year, fighting them, with all the pieces of legislation, that would be difficult to remember, specific legislators, this and that. I'm just going to throw it out there, right? There's a assemblywoman in New York named Linda Rosenthal, okay? She drops hundreds of bills each year, typically dealing with dogs, companion animals, changing stuff around. She's run a piece of legislation on African species the last couple of years, and the title of her bill, of the bill she has, is the Big Five, African Big Five, right? She has, first of all, there's 7 different kinds of species in there, and she's missing Cape buffalo, which is a Big Five. So these legislators don't even know what they're talking about when they write these bills. She's got Big Africa 5 ban through ports of New Jersey and this, that, and the other thing. And you go and you look at the species, that the Big Five aren't even on there. And there's 4 other different species on there. They have, they have their own little niche, if you will, of the things that they're going to go after. And they literally just have staff write bills that they don't even do the research on. That's the scary part. If she would come out and say this is a ban on Big Five coming into the state of New York, and listed the Africa Big Five species, okay, and did some research, fair fight, right? Like, okay, you did your research, okay, we're going to beat you on the merits here. I mean, they don't even have the right stuff in the bills, but they just keep repeating it. They just keep introducing it. And that's the frustrating thing on my part, is that that Americans who elect these people don't even do their own research to find out, is this person even know what they're doing? But I don't know. That's why we do what we do, I guess. We deal with the frustration. But
let's talk a little bit to kind of federally what's on your guys' mind without so much wading into it too deeply. Do you think sportsmen are going to have a seat at the table? I know some people may have had mixed feelings about the past administration, but from what I observed and having been on meetings, visiting the Department of Interior, I felt and I perceived that sportsmen and women did have a greater voice. Do you see that translating into the new administration? Do you foresee that sportsmen are not going to be equally as maybe consulted under this new administration? Is that something you guys are worried about? Have you tried to reach out to the new people at the agencies so far?
I'm very concerned. The last administration, from a sportsman's standpoint, was very good. they would listen. They did some, created some new rules. Had the lower 48 delist the wolves, which the antis have already filed, and going to be lawsuits on that. But my biggest concern, I guess, is that Representative Grijalva still going to chair in the House, and the new pick for Interior. They don't have a track record of ever really supporting us, and they tend to, in their speeches and the legislation they're putting out, they're blaming everything including hunting and fishing and all that, to climate change. Okay, and so my biggest concern is that it's going to go to I think any sort of discussion like that should be an EPA. That's just me personally, not in Interior. But I have a feeling that it's all the climate change stuff is going to be on Interior and EPA, and they're just going to want to shut everything down. Basically, I think they're just going to say, we've got to shut everything down because we've got to find out, what's causing, whatever they claim is happening. And I just don't think that they care about what we have to say. I think it's their way or the highway. So I'm very concerned that on the rule side, on federal lawsuits that have to do with everything that we fight to protect, is just not going to be a priority. It's just not going to. I just don't think they're going to want to have anything to do with it. They're just going to shut it down and move forward with whatever it is they're trying to do. Brian, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's concerning. How much is campaign trail talk and appeasing to a base, and how much will become truly policy is hard to say. I guess that's the wait and see part. I mean, out of those 40 executive orders that Biden signed on his first 1 or 2 days in office, reversing, or he doesn't actually have the power to actually change it, but as Bruce and I were talking about last week when it happened, sign the executive orders, and it is ordering them to look at the delisting of the wolves in the lower 48, and look at the Alaska rules change, which we were part of that lawsuit, and then changing that back from the Obama administration's rules changes. So that's not promising, but it allows them to wave their flag and say, appease to their base that they're doing something on this. Whether how much they follow through or how much of a platform that becomes, we'll have to wait and see. But it's concerning that that's right at the top of the list right off the bat.
Yeah.
So you have that, you have the firearm stuff, you have a whole lot of stuff and concerns that they don't seem real receptive to us, but wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, our good friend from Texas, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, has got legislation out there to register your ammunition, register your guns, have markings on they are the whole gamut. Second Amendment issues right on down to hunting, fishing, and trapping. I think we're gonna see a lot of fights at the federal level. Some folks have asked me, who do you think's got the real power in DC now? And I think, to be honest with you, I think it's the senator from West Virginia, Manchin, Murkowski, and Collins. Because the House is going to ram through whatever they want. They've got more than enough votes. It's going to come down to those 3 votes in the Senate. Because if you have a tie, the vice president's obviously going to go with the way they want. So, you ask me personally, I think those 3 are going to be the most powerful folks here for at least for the first 2 years, because we'll have, House elections in 22, and your districts will be withdrawn. But as far as the House of Representatives go, we're going to have a fight.
Yeah, although I am a little bit encouraged by the new ranking member. I really like what I hear from Congressman Westerman. He's a sportsman.
Yep.
He's really keyed in on the issues, and it's nice to have that at the helm. So if Republicans were to take over, I think it would be nice to have a sportsman leading the committee. And I think he can appeal to a broad base of people, not just people in his own party. But it's refreshing we have that kind of leading the counteroffensive to Representative Grijalva's chairmanship. So it'll be interesting to see that too. And I'm a little encouraged, like I said, by Westerman chairing up that committee. But what do you guys, as I have you for a few more minutes, what do you recommend for people in terms of getting involved in the process? Obviously with Sportsmen's Alliance, what can people do?
You take this one, Brian.
Well, I mean, yes, support us, support partners like us that are fighting at the state level and at the federal level. But a lot of this comes down to media and marketing and making noise. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. And I mean, animal rights activists make up 5% or so of the population, and they get an out proportioned amount of ink and headlines and reaction. And it's because they're noisy. It's because they make complaints that they call. I mean, as bad as the California thing is with the bears, it's nice to see the response of people from California, from other states. I'm getting social media messages, I'm getting texts, I'm getting calls, I'm getting emails on what can I do, what can I do, what can I do? And that's great. That's what we need to have happen in all 50 states and at the federal level, everywhere. But it needs to happen before it becomes an outright ban, before we even get to that discussion point. Because if it takes an outright ban and not the elimination of hound hunting, the elimination of bait, the elimination of trapping, the elimination of these smaller niche practices, then we're dead. You know, I wrote a story on it before. Sportsmen, we're notorious. We're not waiting for the wolf at the door. We're waiting until he's under our bed and choking us before we actually start fighting back. And so we need to be more politically active and put more pressure on them in any way we can, and get good ink, good op-eds. We can help write an op-ed or proof an op-ed or whatever. We need that countermeasure. I mean, just look at the tactics they use and employ them, but be judicious about it. Use facts, use figures, use that emotion, but from the right standpoint.
And just to piggyback on that, one of the biggest challenges we have is everyone fighting for all hunting, fishing, and trapping issues. For too long, fighting a trapping ban, maybe you call Whitetail or someone else and say, hey, will you guys weigh in? Well, that's not really that's really not my thing. What our community has begun to do is to rally around every little challenge to our way of life, because trapping may not be your issue, right? Let's say your issue is just black bear. You just target black bear with rifle, okay? And guess what happens when trapping's all gone? They're picking a new method, yep, right? Or a new passion. So then they go after the bear hunters, and the bear hunters are saying, well, we want your help. Well, bear hunting's not really my thing. So you see what I'm saying is, even if you're just an angler, a recreational angler, you should be weighing in on the bear issue in California. You should be weighing in on the trapping issue in New Mexico.
The Humane Society has said it. They've point blank said it, that they're going to take it species by species, method by method, state by state. They point blank said that. And they're starting in California and they're moving out from there, species by species, method by method, state by state. And what Bruce just said about activating anglers is huge, because there's 50 million anglers out there. If the anglers would start helping out, that's a huge political voice and block there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, incrementalism is a big problem, like we've discussed before, because they won't stop at one form of hunting. I suspect bear bans are going to come to Virginia, although we have a very robust active system in place. And I think hunters and anglers do have to forge more relationships. We generally do. But gentlemen, it's been such a pleasure to catch up with you, to hear about what's happening. I'm going to encourage people to connect with you guys and to also follow Sportsmen's Alliance. But thanks again for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us. Love being on.